This video, I think, is going to split opinion massively. At the moment, it seems like most people are wanting Jesse Marsch to go after that performance last night at time of recording against Leicester, where we've lost 2-0 at the King Power Stadium. But for me, it's a difficult one because we haven't won a game in 2 months. We haven't won a game in the last 7 after a really bright start to the season. We've played some good games against Arsenal and against Chelsea where we did manage to win this season. So we've shown promising signs at times. We've also shown that we lack invention up front. We don't like scoring goals because we just can't put the ball in the back of the net. Mistake prone. But I think what I'm going to try and do in this video is break it up a little bit into some different things. So Jesse can't take all of the flack for what's happening at the moment, and I think everybody has to agree on that. What Marc Roca did for that goal last night in the Leicester game, as that's the most recent mistake. What can Jesse do about that? Marc Roca didn't get his head up, didn't check that nobody was going to run and take the ball off him, in which Jamie Vardy did, and it ended up in a goal. Take Robin Koch out of the situation, it's not his fault. He was just trying to get there and it's accidentally gone in his own net. There's nothing he can do about that. But he shouldn't have got there in the first place because of that mistake. But that's nothing that Jesse could possibly do about that. You take the Rodrigo one at the weekend against Arsenal. The ball comes to him and he just absolutely leathers it back to his own, back towards his own goal. You just can't do that in the Premier League. Then you take the Llorente ones against Brentford, and when you start to look at the season on a whole, a lot of it is individual mistakes. Now, I haven't actually checked this, but I can imagine that if you looked at individual mistakes leading to goals in the Premier League this season, we'd be way up there, if not top. So, for me, that's a worrying sign. But, like I said, it's nothing to do with Jesse Marsch, that. So, that's my defence of him. Half of our goals that we've conceded, or a lot of our goals that we've conceded at least, have been from players making individual errors, which is nothing to do with any coach. If it was any coach in there, even if it was somebody that we absolutely hated, I would say that's not his fault. So the other side of the coin is Jesse Marsch's team selections and his substitutions, and I think that's a big part of his game that he's been lacking. For me, when we played against Arsenal, we played really well, other than Rodrigo had a bit of a stinker, and when Bamford came on, he made us much better. So for me, against Leicester, we should have kept the exact same team and put Bamford up front instead of Rodrigo. But instead, he decided he was going to put Somerville in, which, if you've watched any of my live watch-alongs and my streams, I just don't rate as a starting 11 player. I don't think he's good enough to start for Leeds United in the Premier League. Taking Jack Harrison out when Jack Harrison obviously has been a big part of how well we've done over the last couple of years in terms of creating chances, scoring goals even. So to take him out, I think was a big mistake. To then put Diego Llorente back in. Now, Diego Llorente wasn't at fault for any of that, but you kind of just want to keep a consistent defence, don't you? There was nothing we could do about Strauch being injured and then having to put Firpo in. That was a given because Strauch was injured and we only have one of the left back. Don't think Firpo had much help in that game because everything was targeted down his side, and he didn't get much help from the midfield. But he's still, to me, not up to standard, and so we had to have signed a left back. But we'll come on to that. So the first thing I want to say is individual mistakes are the players themselves' fault. Then you have team selection and substitutions. I think a Southampton game is a good example where he should have made different substitutions earlier on when he could start to see that the game was slipping away from him. So that's another one where you say, okay, well, Jesse's not made the right substitutions or he's not started the game with the right team. But hindsight is very easy. It's hard to make these decisions as a manager. Having said that, that's no excuse. He's a professional manager. He's been doing it for a lot of years now. He should know his players and what players to start in what game. So I think team selection and substitutions have been bad from Jesse Marsch at times throughout this season. The only other thing with Jesse is the fact that he doesn't seem like he has a plan for breaking down teams who like to sit in and let us have more of the ball. We seem much more comfortable when we don't have the ball and when we can try and win the ball in transition and counter-attack teams like the top teams who will come and try and play football against us. So We don't seem to have a plan to break teams down. And so that's really disappointing. And then the third factor to this is the board or the powers that be at Leeds United, because we should have signed another striker. I think if we sign another striker of decent standard, of decent quality, to go up top when Bamford's not injured, when Bamford is injured, or to at least compete for a place with Bamford. If we sign that striker earlier in the transfer window and we just get it done and get one over the line, doesn't matter if it's Cody Gakpo, Charles de Ketelaere, there's more than 2 strikers in Europe that we could have gone for. Jonathan Burkhart, which I've done a video on before, is probably a good example. Similar playing style to Bamford in terms of how many goals he scores, his assists, and all those sorts of things that we like to talk about. So there were other options out there, and I think the board have to take some level of blame for this, the way that we've played, because we also didn't sign a left back. If we'd signed a left back, Strauch wouldn't have had to play left back, and he potentially could have started the season at centre back with Robin Koch, which I think is our strongest centre back pairing. Then you get a consistent team, a consistent defence, a consistent run of games together. And so I think that's really important in the Premier League. So if we'd have signed a left back and a striker, we'd have been in a much better position, I think, because I think where we look at our XG and the actual goals that we have scored, we should be scoring a lot more goals than we have given the chances we've created. So we needed another striker. We needed a left back to come in there who can do a bit of the defensive work, but a bit of the attacking work as well. Because for me, Strauch is very good defensively because he's a centre back, but he's not great at going forward. And Firpo is the opposite. He's good at going forward-ish and not very good at all at actually defending. He's beaten far too easily on far too many occasions. So I think it's 3 prongs basically of the issues at the moment with Leeds United. Like we talked about at the start, you've got individual errors, which is a player's fault, Jesse Marsch's team selection and tactics in certain games, not other games he's done well, and then you've got to look at the transfer policy as well and who was actually brought in. So they're the 3 issues, right? And everybody's calling for Jesse Marsch's head. So I think it's easy to call for Jesse Marsch's head because that's the one that usually takes the bullet. It's usually the manager that goes, isn't it? But you can't sack players because you've got an investment in them. But having said all of this, and having said what all the noise is on Twitter about Jesse Marsch going and all of that stuff, it doesn't matter. It does not matter one bit what we think, because it's down to the board. And for me, the board, we saw how long Bielsa was kept in a job, even when he was killing us at times. This board will back Jesse Marsch until the very last moment they think they can afford to do it. So if he gets sacked, for me, it's going to be after the World Cup. Like, it has to be at a point in the season where you can well and truly say that we're in a relegation battle and we might be in danger of going down, which is what they did with Bielsa. But they've brought Jesse Marsch in, and they've bought all the players that he wanted that fit his system. So they don't think they're about to go, right, let's throw that out the window. Because then you might bring in another coach. I mean, this is a bit silly, but let's have a look at one end of the spectrum. Somebody suggested Rafa Benitez on Twitter, right? And I don't think that would ever happen because it's a complete opposite style of what the club wants to do in terms of how they want to play, because there's a certain identity that the club want to try and maintain. But let's say it was somebody like Rafa Benitez, just for the sake of this point. You then think, right, okay, well, Rafa Benitez is going to maybe play 3 at the back, essentially 5 at the back, including the wing backs. So then you're losing out on positions for the attackers further up the field. He might not want to utilise 2 holding midfielders. He might not like certain players that have been signed. So, like, you start to think, well, maybe Brendan Aronson isn't given as much of a chance in that system, or somebody else in Estera his career tails off because you bring in a manager that plays in a complete opposite style to the way that these Leeds players want to play. So it's a huge risk changing managers. I think it's more risky than keeping a manager in this situation, especially because all of these players at once have been signed for the manager. So for me, Jesse Marsch stays till at least after the World Cup, and all of that noise on Twitter, it doesn't mean anything. but it is going to get worse and worse in the ground. Like, I saw some clips. Lewis tweeted one. LUFC Lewis tweeted one. All the fans singing "What the effing hell was that?" Which, fair enough, because we were absolutely terrible in that game. Excuse me, but the Marcelo Bielsa chants, I think, are, to me, are completely pointless and unwarranted, because chanting Marcelo Bielsa, because, like, if you were chanting Marcelo Bielsa when we were doing well, then it's just a homage to a great man and a great manager who we all love. But if you're chanting Marcelo Bielsa because Jesse Marsch is doing bad, that's not going to help him. And surely the only thing we want to do as Leeds fans is see Jesse Marsch make this team win. If anybody doesn't want to see us winning under Jesse Marsch, then what are your priorities? Because surely you just want your manager to win games with your team. So to me, just trying to get in his head like that and giving him abuse, chanting Marcelo Bielsa and stuff, I don't think it helps. But everybody's, obviously, I'm not telling you what to do. Everybody's free to have their own opinion on that. But for me personally, all I can say is that I don't think I would be chanting that at Jesse Marsch, because I really want him to succeed. I think people say, oh, he says all the right things, but he's got no tactical nous. I think he does have tactical nous. He's a student of the game. He's done a lot of research. He's done a lot of time under other managers as an assistant coach and stuff, plying his trade and trying to get to the point where he is now. And he's got this Premier League job. And I think we need to give him time. Everybody else has said, look at Mikel Arteta. When he first came in, they weren't doing great. They obviously won an FA Cup, but that's a one-off. And the second season, they were literally at the bottom of the Premier League for the first couple of weeks, and eventually they got Europa League, and look at them now, they're flying. Jesse Marsch has had 11 games and 10 games this season, so he's had 20 games, but one half of those games, he didn't have any of these players that he actually wanted to sign. He was having to play players that aren't used to the system, don't really know what they're doing, so to me, you have to give him at least a season to get it to all bed in properly. It hasn't been good enough. Don't get me wrong on that. I completely agree with everybody complaining about the performance last night and the performance against Palace and the performance against other teams. We've not been good enough. But for me, it will improve in time. And I've got to believe that, because I like to be quite positive about Leeds, and you'll know that if you've watched the channel before. I like to try and be positive, and I think that Leeds will improve in time. I am going to be doing a match day vlog from the Fulham game on Sunday, so join me back on the channel for that, because that'll be the first one in a while. Hopefully we get a big 3 points there, and we can come back to this in a few weeks and see. Potentially I might make another video like this as the season is paused for the World Cup, and that way we'll be able to sort of see what the mood is like now. But at the moment, the mood is very dour, very down, and most people aren't happy with what's going on at Leeds United. But that's my 2 penneth on the situation. Thanks for watching this one. Bit of a depressing video, but that's the state of Leeds United at the moment, and we do let it affect our moods as football fans. That's just the way it is. But thanks for watching this one, and I'll see you next time on Leeds Lately.